I was sitting in a hospital room, exactly 1 year after my divorce, when my ex-mother-in-law appeared in the doorway with a satisfied smile. "Dumping you was the best choice my son ever made," she said, folding her arms. "Now he has a baby boy with your former best friend." The words should have hurt. A year earlier, they would have shattered me. Instead, I simply looked at her and smiled. "Is that really what you think?" For a moment, she seemed disappointed by my calmness. She had probably expected tears, anger, or at least visible regret. She wanted proof that I was still the woman they had discarded. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and fresh coffee. Outside, carts rattled along polished floors. Somewhere down the hall, a newborn cried. Meanwhile, memories flashed through my mind. My husband walking out, my best friend avoiding my calls, the whispers, the rumors, the humiliation. They had built a perfect story. I was the wife who wasn't enough. The woman who couldn't keep her marriage together. The obstacle that needed to be removed so they could start their real family. My ex-mother-in-law stepped closer. "You know," she continued, "sometimes things happen for a reason." I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. "They do." 5 minutes later, the door opened, and the color drained from her face. "My name is Claire, and for most of my marriage, I was the quiet person everyone overlooked. I wasn't weak. I simply believed loyalty mattered more than attention. While my husband chased promotions and networking events, I managed our home, supported his ambitions, and handled the countless details that kept our lives running smoothly. The strange part was that the more dependable I became, the more invisible I seemed. My ex-mother-in-law never tried to hide her disappointment in me. She preferred loud personalities, flashy success stories, and people who constantly demanded recognition. I was none of those things. To her, my calm nature looked like weakness. Then there was Vanessa, my former best friend. For nearly 15 years, she knew every important chapter of my life. She celebrated birthdays at my table, listened to my fears, and called me family. Looking back, I realized she spent years studying my trust while I mistook it for friendship. When my marriage collapsed, everyone assumed they understood the story before hearing a single word from me. My silence became evidence. Their accusations became facts. My refusal to fight publicly was mistaken for guilt. What they never understood was that I observe far more than I say. People often underestimate the person who remains calm during betrayal, and sometimes the quietest person in the room knows exactly how the story will end. The problems didn't begin with one dramatic betrayal. They arrived in small pieces, scattered across years so subtly that I barely noticed them at first. Vanessa started finishing my husband's sentences before he could. At dinner parties, they shared private jokes that somehow excluded everyone else at the table. Whenever I entered a conversation, an awkward pause would briefly settle between them, before they quickly changed the subject. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, trust isn't something you abandon easily. My ex-mother-in-law encouraged it without appearing to. She would praise Vanessa in ways that felt oddly pointed. "She has such confidence," she'd say, while glancing in my direction. "Some women naturally know how to keep a man's attention." The words were always wrapped in a smile. Just polite enough to deny, just sharp enough to leave a mark. My husband never defended me. Instead, he'd stare at his phone or take a sip of his drink, as though he hadn't heard anything at all. That silence hurt more than the comments. Over time, invitations stopped including me. Group messages went unanswered. Plans seemed to change at the last minute. Yet Vanessa and my husband always appeared to know exactly what was happening. The glances grew longer. The explanations grew shorter. And with every passing month, I felt less like a wife and more like a guest observing her own life from a distance. Something was happening. I just didn't know how far it had already gone. The moment everything changed wasn't dramatic. There was no argument, no confession, no scene that would have looked impressive in a movie. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening. My husband was in the shower when his phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I wasn't searching for evidence. In fact, I had spent months convincing myself there was nothing to find. But then I saw Vanessa's name. A single message appeared on the screen. "She suspects something. Be careful." I remember staring at those 4 words while the refrigerator hummed softly behind me. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. Instead, an unexpected calm settled over me. For months, I'd been questioning my instincts. Wondering if I was insecure. Wondering if I was imagining the distance growing between us. That message answered every question at once. Over the next several weeks, I stopped confronting and started observing. I quietly gathered information. Credit card records, travel receipts, messages they thought had been deleted. Nothing illegal, nothing reckless, just facts. The more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became. The affair hadn't started recently. It had been going on for years. Oddly, the discovery hurt less than the realization that followed. Neither of them felt guilty. They genuinely believed I would never notice. That was the moment I decided enough was enough. Not because I wanted revenge, because I finally understood that protecting people who betray you only guarantees they'll do it again. And for the first time, I stopped trying to save my marriage and started preparing for my future. Once I accepted that my marriage was over, my priorities changed. I stopped wasting energy on explanations and started focusing on facts. Before meeting my husband, I had worked as a financial compliance analyst. My job required attention to detail, patience, and the ability to spot patterns hidden inside thousands of pages of records. Those skills had built my career, and now they became unexpectedly useful in my personal life. I hired an attorney without telling anyone. Not an aggressive one, a careful one. Someone who valued documentation over emotion. Together, we reviewed everything. Property records, business investments, retirement accounts, insurance policies, and financial disclosures. The goal wasn't revenge. The goal was accuracy. What surprised me wasn't the affair. It was the money. Several assets had been moved without proper disclosure. Certain transactions raised questions that neither my husband nor his advisors would be eager to answer under legal scrutiny. My attorney advised patience, so I became patient. While my husband and Vanessa enjoyed their new relationship publicly, I remained quiet. Friends interpreted my silence as defeat. My ex-mother-in-law treated it as proof that her son had won. I never corrected them. People reveal remarkable things when they believe you're powerless. Month after month, I organized records, preserved communications, and followed every legal recommendation precisely. No threats, no confrontations, no social media battles. By the time the divorce proceedings officially began, everyone assumed I was unprepared. What they didn't realize was that I had spent nearly a year building a case based entirely on facts, and facts have a way of speaking for themselves. The hospital room fell silent when the man stepped through the door. My ex-mother-in-law's confident smile vanished instantly. She recognized him. Everyone involved in the divorce had. He was the forensic accountant who had spent months reviewing financial records during the settlement process. The same expert whose findings had completely changed the outcome of the case. For the first time since entering the room, she looked uncertain. "What is he doing here?" she asked quietly. I glanced toward him and smiled. "He works with my husband now," I replied. The confusion on her face deepened. Then understanding arrived. Months earlier, the investigation had uncovered undisclosed financial transfers connected to several business ventures. The legal consequences hadn't been criminal, but they had been expensive. Extremely expensive. Assets had been reassessed. Settlements had been adjusted. Partnership agreements had been rewritten. The lifestyle my ex-husband had worked so hard to display suddenly became much harder to maintain. Meanwhile, the accountant approached my bedside with a folder. "Everything is finalized," he said. "Good," I answered. My ex-mother-in-law stared at the documents as though they might somehow change. They didn't. Reality rarely does. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Outside the room, nurses walked past and distant conversations echoed through the hallway. Life continued normally, completely indifferent to our shock. That was the part I found most satisfying. No dramatic confrontation, no victory speech, just consequences arriving exactly when they were supposed to. And as she stood there speechless, I realized I no longer needed revenge. The truth had already done all the work for me. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They unfolded gradually, the way truth usually does. Within weeks, people who had confidently chosen sides during the divorce became noticeably quieter. Friends who once avoided my calls suddenly wanted to catch up. A few even admitted they had believed rumors without ever asking for my version of events. What struck me most was how uncomfortable they seemed. Not because I was angry, because I wasn't. My ex-husband's reputation suffered more than his finances. Business partners became cautious. Trust, once damaged, proved difficult to rebuild. Nothing catastrophic happened overnight, but opportunities became harder to secure, and questions followed him into rooms that had once welcomed him without hesitation. Vanessa faced a different reality. The excitement of winning someone else's husband faded when every day life replaced secrecy and fantasy. People who had admired their relationship now viewed it through a different lens. As for my ex-mother-in-law, her certainty disappeared. The story she had proudly repeated, that her son had upgraded his life by leaving me, no longer sounded convincing, even to her. The greatest change, however, happened inside me. For years, I had measured my worth through other people's approval. Losing that habit was harder than losing my marriage. That's why this matters. Many people believe betrayal only damages relationships. In reality, it can damage your sense of self. And the moment you stop letting others define your value is the moment their power over you begins to disappear. A year after the divorce, I finally understood something that had taken me far too long to learn. Closure doesn't come from watching someone else suffer. It comes from realizing you survived what was meant to break you. After my ex-mother-in-law left the hospital that day, I sat quietly by the window and watched the evening sun settle across the parking lot. For the first time in years, I felt no anger toward her, my ex-husband, or Vanessa, only distance. Their choices had shaped a chapter of my life, but they no longer controlled the story. In the months that followed, I focused on things I had neglected for years. I traveled, reconnected with people who had stood by me when it wasn't convenient, expanded my consulting work, slowly built a life that belonged entirely to me. The irony wasn't lost on me. The divorce I once feared had given me the freedom I never realized I needed. Sometimes people ask whether I regret staying silent for so long. I don't, because silence gave me perspective. Perspective gave me patience, and patience allowed the truth to reveal itself without my help. My ex-husband and Vanessa will continue living with the consequences of their choices. That burden belongs to them. As for me, I finally stopped looking backward. Some betrayals destroy a life, others clear the path to the one you were always meant to live. And as I walked out of that hospital and into the fading light, I realized the greatest revenge wasn't proving them wrong. It was no longer needing them to know they were.